that it's the human beings who play God and cause a lot of problems. So,
And I think that's a very good point at which we should start our conversation, where human beings play God.
yes.
Uh, yeah, and I think that's going to be a major theme of our conversation today. But so let's first remind ourselves, Willie, the reason me and you are talking is
Mm,
because a prominent political leader in Uganda,
mhm,
Dr. Kiza Besigye,
mhm,
was abducted in
mhm,
Hurlingham in Nairobi and carted away into Uganda,
mhm,
and then subsequently has been charged with treason.
mhm,
And so I want to discuss all the legal issues surrounding that, and there are many, plus even the political issues that are related, and your experience dealing with this kind of behavior during Moi's era in Kenya. And then, but the place I want to start and where your linkage with Uganda becomes much stronger is your student days in Dar es Salaam. Uh, you were in Dar es Salaam with a prominent player in this whole story. Do you want to tell us about that?
yeah. Well, Museveni was 2 years ahead of me. Okay.
Yes. Mm,
He was seen in the law faculty very often because he was doing some courses on administrative law and banking law,
mm, mm,
and those courses were taken by people who wanted to be DEOs or bank officers. So it was a
mm,
service course, and it used to be, to come to the faculty of law. But mm, everybody on that campus knew Museveni, you know.
Why?
Well, he was the president of what was called USAF, or,
Yes.
or chair of what was called USAF. That is the um, what was this United uh, African Students Revolutionary Front,
Yes.
and it was that group. Members of
Mm,
the front were
mm,
very radical. They were, you know, well known. I
mm,
never remember seeing Museveni wearing civilian clothes. He was always uh, wearing military fatigues, and he had bodyguards. So
really?
I don't. Yeah, he had bodyguards, and there were a lot of stories about him sharing a room with the guy who died, James Wakabulo.
Wapakabulo, yes.
Yes, yes. And people said that James was the one who cleaned the room, and you know, so there were many stories about him. But I remember
Well,
two things about
yes.
Museveni. One was
Mm,
uh, he a lot of students will go to report to him if you had what we then used to call academic terrorists. People.
what were
Uh,
academic terrorists here?
yeah, there are these guys who would not allow you to ask questions when they are talking,
Hmm.
and they were, they were like pastors, they sat
Hmm.
there and lectured, and you couldn't ask any questions, and if you did, there was a problem. But
Yeah.
a lot of students would go to Museveni and say, we have an academic terrorist, can you come and save us from that? And of course you oblige, and
Mm.
he did that quite often. Then the other thing was something called Rag Day. I don't know whether a lot of people are
Mm.
familiar with that ritual. University
Yes.
of Dar es Salaam for a long time was a college
Yes.
of the University of London, and so they inherited this ritual of Rag Day, where students will wear rags and go
Mm.
to town and beg, and the money they get. they would give it to some charity. And
Yes.
this is socialist Tanzania. Nyerere is in power. So
Yes.
Museveni basically says, this rag day is an abuse to the dignity of Tanzanians, and it's a bourgeois ritual, and it has to be stopped. And
Yeah.
he stopped it with his friends. So what they did was to deflate the tires of the buses that were supposed to drive people into town. And that being very hot, they couldn't walk there. And the guy who organized the rag day was Amos Wako, who is who
who,
was
who
who
became
was,
Attorney General?
yes. And in that class there were, I think the guy called Ria Kategaya was in that class,
Yes.
and the former Chief Justice Benjamin, what was his
Odoki.
name? Odoki, yeah.
Benjamin Odoki. Yes.
Yes, so that happened when I was a first year,
Yes.
uh, and there were a lot of debates as to why this happened and so forth. So
Yeah.
and the arguments from Seven's group made sense to me
Mhm.
and some other people. Why would people do this? And
Mm.
so I met him near the library, and I asked him. Um,
Mm.
so why didn't you call us to the Nkrumah Hall
Mm.
and just give us your arguments? They seem to be very very persuasive. And so
Yes.
the first thing he asked me was, so which year are you in? And I said, I'm studying law, year one.
Yes.
And so he told something that I've never forgotten, that
Mm.
the students are not to be consulted. So
Did it
so
occur
that
to him that he was a student as well?
no, no, he didn't. And I guess that's when I should have noticed, that this guy was cut out to be a brutal dictator, from the beginning. But we,
Yeah.
we 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 used to welcome him to Nairobi
Mm.
when he was in the bush, and the University of East Africa had great solidarity among the alumni.
Yes.
And in Nairobi, we collect some money, and there's a
Mm.
woman called Grace Githu who was handling, the monies, and and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So I just want to jump ahead a little bit.
yeah.
When do you first and how do you get to know Colonel Dr. Kiza Besigye?
Uh, I knew of him, because he was, a doctor in the, in the struggle there. All right. And
Yes.
I my supervisor in Dar es Salaam when I did my master's was Dan Wadada Nabudere. So I
Professor, yeah.
knew him. I knew Rugumayo. These guys who are
Omo,
called the Gang of Four. You know,
Omonyo Joke and Yash Tandon.
yeah, Yash Tandon,
Yeah.
Kayonga.
Ah, yes.
Njuko. A guy called Lutu. So,
Yes.
so yeah, and I great guys. So
Yes.
and I think the Nabudere group had their own base in the Ruenzoris,
Yes. And
during, yeah,
and a few
during,
people in Elgon, I think.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So they talked a lot about, Museveni, and of course the Kano,
Mm.
but physically, I think I I must have met him in Nairobi, I think. Yeah, yeah,
Mm. Mhm.
yeah, just a few times. Yeah,
So the thing that I want us to start with, first of all,
yeah.
is
Mm.
the whole act of abducting him in Nairobi.
Mm.
What isn't that an infraction I mean, the act itself, is it an arrest? Is it how does that work? That the agents of a different country cross into another. I mean, how does that work? Even in just as fast as with international law, was that in itself even legal?
No, it's not. And you know the first politician to be abducted from this country was Abdullah Öcalan, right?
Yes, the Turkish
Yeah,
leader
the
of
Turkish, the PPK guy, you know.
PKK guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and we everybody says that, you know, money was. I mean, the President Moy was given money, and
Mm.
you know, he was in Nairobi. I don't know for what purpose, but people say he was actually here on his way to some other place, right?
In
And
transit.
yeah, in transit, and you know, that's when he was handed over.
Mm.
And there's so the issues of abductions and you know, it's has always
Mm.
been under international law. It's you know, it's completely uh, you know, wrong.
Mm.
uh, and even the ones that President Ruto's government has been involved in, the abductions, the disappearances, the kidnappings, you
Mm.
know, extrajudicial killings, and all manner
Mm.
of things. All right,
Mm.
they
Yes.
under our constitution they're criminal. You know, they are unconstitutional, and
Hmm.
and and in terms of democratic values, when you do that
Yes.
kind of thing as a state,
Yes.
or you know, as a government,
Hmm.
which it's under our constitution is supposed to protect our lives and property. All right, when you
Yes.
have a
Yes.
state and a leader, you know,
Mm.
who both go rogue and they don't respect, you know, the rule
Mm.
of law,
Yeah.
then you know, that's very, 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 very problematic, and particularly when the judiciaries come and say, well, this is unconstitutional, this is illegal, and
Yeah.
the dictators find that inconvenient, and they actually come and say, we're not going to you know, obey court orders, which in my books is overthrowing the constitution, you know. uh, and so I think there's so many in abductions. Even in Tanzania, I hear a lot about
Yes.
abductions,
Yep.
and disappearances and so forth. So,
Yes, I think there's another
Rwanda,
political leader, an opposition political leader in Tanzania who's also gone missing.
right, right, yeah, and I guess when it comes to Kagame, we know exactly what happens.
Yeah.
So the East African region, let's be clear,
Mm.
is ruled by very brutal dictators who don't
Mm.
respect the rule of law. All right.
Hmm. Yeah.
And obviously, the Kenyan government handed over
Yes.
the Kano to the Ugandan goons who came. There's no way our government didn't know about this.
Yeah.
No way. So the security systems in both countries are probably they are definitely in touch. You know.
In
Uh,
fact, I think one or two senior officers has boasted that the plan was to actually kill him in Kenya and dump him somewhere in Kenya or disappear his body.
oh yeah, they could. Yeah. I saw that. I saw somebody saying that they could have killed him if they wanted to, which is true. I mean, in the case of Kenya, there are so many uh, forests. There are many, you know, quarries full of water. You know,
Yeah.
and there are hyenas in certain places where you can kill guys and their bodies are never. You know, we
Never
have all those.
discovered.
We have those histories. You know,
Yes.
and I have seen this now for almost 5 decades. All right,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and the most painful thing is, as you grow older, you started thinking, when are these dictators going to disappear? When are we going to have alternative political leadership? And when we have it, then you see those leaders are either bought or they are treated the way the Kano is being treated. No democracy, nothing. But I think what I saw in Kenya in June last year, when there was this Gen Z revolution, uh,
Yes.
I, I I kind of felt that you know the, in East Africa there's going to the changes are on the horizon. Maybe I'm naive, but I have that feeling that
At,
the
at,
Gen
at,
Z's.
at 70, it's difficult to be naive, Willy.
Yeah,
but
but I see, like in the case of Kenya, and I'm happy about Uganda as well. I've seen people demonstrating. All right, because that's what should happen. I don't think that they can kill the millions of us if we decide that these dictators must go. I don't think so. You
let me
know.
take you let me take you back to when you took on the I think this was probably Kenya at its most brutal. This is in the 80s, and
Yeah.
Moi was Moi and the law were one and the same. It's probably the constitution. But when you look at that behavior and how Moi eventually ended, and so what happened to the institutions that were supposed to have either checked the excesses of the executive or the president and didn't, or played
along? Yeah, that's a great question. The Kenyan constitution, which we basically fought for decades, right?
Yes.
The basic vision of it was that we didn't want the status quo, that that existed from 63. These
Yes.
dictatorships and corruption, everything. When you look at that constitution, you can actually see the kind of leadership that's required, the political parties we should have,
Yes.
independence of institutions.
Yes.
It's all there, in abstract terms. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
But it's the kind of constitution that, like the Gen Z did. Well, they framed political questions out of certain articles of the Constitution, all right?
Yes. Yes.
And made political demands, okay?
Yes.
And
Yes.
of course, the government here couldn't charge them with treason because they were using the Constitution.
Right.
So, but we have a Constitution,
Yes.
but somebody told me, he said, your constitution is like a beautiful baby, that was born to you guys on the 27th of August 2010.
Yeah.
But you proceeded to give the beautiful baby to child traffickers to bring it up. So what did you expect? And it's the same. It's the issue of this alternative political leadership, because if you find people who find the constitution inconvenient, people who the Supreme Court, like in Uganda, saying that these military courts should not try civilians, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the president says, hey, we're not going to obey that. And in Kenya, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
The President Ruto was told by the court, you can't send police officers to Haiti. It's unconstitutional. All right. And there are many court orders that has just been you know,
Disregarded.
yeah, disobeyed. And the thing that bothers me is that these guys are being supported by foreign interests that pontificate about the rule of law and democracy, you know,
Yes,
and they
yes.
don't respect our constitutions. They don't even tell these guys, wait a minute, this should not happen. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So so
it,
let me
yeah.
I just wanted to take you back to
Yeah.
you know so Besigye was in Nairobi as a at
Yes.
the invitation of Martha Karua, and
Yeah.
then
In fact, I was in that. Mother Karua was launching a memoir.
yes, and
And so,
mm,
so she kept on telling us that she was expecting him only for us to know that he had been abducted and he was back in Uganda. Yeah.
what do you make of the whole issue around her when she applied to represent him, and then there was so much drama, and then she was denied, and then what was your reading into that?
Yeah, I think it's the bar associations in East Africa have become very weak.
Mm,
Uh, a lot of people like Noroji and Kamino
yes.
were advocates of Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Zanzibar.
Zanzibar.
All right.
Yes, yes.
And there were these arrangements where you could get a temporary practicing certificate, you
Mm,
know, uh, to basically defend people, and that used to happen a lot.
mhm,
But I think the bar associations in East Africa
mm,
have become very weak,
mm,
uh, and you know they have to realize that they are a very powerful group in civil society. You see,
mm,
the members pay them money through practicing fees, so they don't have to worry about their sustainability. Uh,
yes,
uh, but it's also maybe is a weakness of the civil society itself in East Africa, because there
mm,
ought to be serious solidarities
mhm,
between the bars where uh, there will be observers, there will be people who can be senior counsel who can come and lead others.
mm.
Um, so I think the bar associations are also, to blame. The
How come they were
Mm.
very strong in Kenya in the 80s? I mean, I remember I think was it Paul Mwite who was president
Yeah, he
during
was
Moise?
president. Yeah, and I was his vice president during the second deliberation. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How did you do it? How were you able to marshal the ability to put up a stand for the rule of law?
Yeah, we 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 just joined the what was called the second deliberation,
Mhm,
and they used the resources of the law society to urge for the repeal of section 2A that made Kano a de jure political party,
mm,
the one party system.
mm,
uh, and we started fighting for the constitution, the freedoms, rights, and everything else. All right.
mm, mm,
And it was easy because this is the law society, and that's what it should fight for, the independence of the judiciary as well. Kenya then also had, I remember when I became president of the law society, the chief justice was a guy called Hancock.
yeah, the British guy.
Hancock, yeah, the British guy. At
Yeah.
some point, he said that the law society should be
A political
a
party.
member of KANU. So, so the judiciary itself was an appendage. of
And
the executive, and that starts with the
and
colonial system where judiciaries were just departments in the attorney general's chambers.
I want to come back to that because you see, so Besigye is then taken to the military court and is, I don't remember whether he was actually charged or it was taken for mention, and then he goes on hunger strike,
Mm-hmm.
uh, protesting against trial in the military court.
Mm-hmm.
With but prior to that, there'd been all these young guys from a party called I think it's called National Unity Party (NUP), who had been on trial at
Mm-hmm.
various times.
Mm-hmm.
But almost nearly 10 years ago, a member of parliament then had challenged the constitutionality of civilians being tried in the court. So then, because of public outreach, finally the judiciary, after almost nearly 10 years, the Supreme Court decides, or the Constitutional Court decides to give a ruling on this matter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the ruling we're talking about. So just tell me, from your perspective,
Mm-hmm.
the ruling, the reaction, and all of these issues, where does that leave the judiciary? And so that's why when I was framing this post, I said, who is on trial here? Is it really Besigye or the judiciary or the state as a whole?
Uh, yeah, the state and the judiciary. All right.
Mm.
Um, as Chief Justice, the advice I used to give to the presidents,
Mm.
because a lot of presidents don't like being told what the law is.
Yeah, yeah,
What you do is to give them a political opinion.
yeah.
Yeah, and I used to tell them, if you don't support the integrity and independence of the judiciary,
Mm.
when your enemies, the political enemies, come after you, where will you go?
Mm.
And I remember I had those discussions with almost all of them, and even Uhuru. So when
Mm.
Uhuru's cows and trees were cut,
Mm.
and his kids had issues with the licensing of their firearms and so forth.
Mm.
They went to court. I tried to call him so that I could tell him that we had that discussion at some point.
Mm.
Uh, so I think for me, judiciaries in East Africa have
Yes.
always been at a crossroad. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
they either you know become appendages of the powers that be, okay,
Mm-hmm. Mm.
or they become temples of justice for people, where people can run to, you
Mm.
know, when they face oppression, exploitation, and domination. And
Mm.
sometimes when you see, like in the case of Kenya, it's kind of seesawing, you
Mm.
see it turns and twists and turns.
Yes.
Sometimes you basically see bold uh, judgments, and then you all of a sudden you see something different. So as an institution, that's problematic for the judiciaries. And in the case of Uganda, of course, I'm sure the judges there have
Should
no.
should 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 the president have
Hmm?
spoken out at all? Should he have commented on this issue? The president.
No, it shouldn't. It shouldn't. But it's Uganda. One of your presidents killed a chief justice once. So
You, you really don't you you you're not very generous with our history.
no,
No.
I mean Benedicto Chiwanuka. Okay,
Yes.
very, very, very courageous, and he basically resisted, you
Mm-hmm.
know, that executive overreach. All
Mm-hmm.
right,
Yes.
and stuck to the rule of law. He was, he, wa- you know. he was
He,
murdered.
he was actually abducted out of the Chief Justice's chambers at the High
Yes,
Court.
yes,
And
yes, and the Court of Appeal of East Africa was hearing cases there, and the Jungus came back to Nairobi,
they fled
shitting in their pants. Yeah, yeah.
after.
So, yeah. So it's I still convinced that the judiciaries have to be very, very, very courageous. I mean, there's something in our constitution we call judicial politics. Okay,
What is that?
where where the judges should decide on whose side they are, and if it's the side of the constitution and the rule of law, there's there shouldn't be any compromise. And if it takes 10 years to make a ruling that is in favor of the people, what does that say about the judiciary itself? So it's a worrying situation. It's a worrying situation. But in Pakistan and India, the bar and the bench are twins joined at the hip. And sometimes you have very serious mass action and demonstrations where judges and lawyers bring down governments.
That's true. I think in Pakistan, they're the ones who drove out Parvez Musharraf.
Yeah. And I think that it's the Kenyan judiciary, for example, their orders are being disobeyed. Even the police officers, they are summoned to court. In cases of habeas corpus applications, they don't come, and they refuse. And
But I mean, I have to ask, what does that do to a society and its future?
Well, the whatever they who talk about rule of law becomes a problem. But in the case of Kenya, I keep on reminding citizens, that they have the right to arrest these people, and take them to the judiciary. Why can't the citizens do it? It's if we can march 10,000 people in the streets of Nairobi, one day we should just say, look, there is this court order against this particular bureaucrat. All right, let's go and abduct him. Take him to the
produce him in court in compliance with the habeas corpus.
Yeah, and I know it's going to happen. What I've seen, the anger of the Gen Zs and millennials in this country.
Yes,
and they are 80% of the 55 million people in this country. All right. So let's wait and see what happens in June when they celebrate the first anniversary of the uprising.
So let me take you back. So eventually, after that ruling, a very frail Besigye was produced at the High Court in a wheelchair, could barely sit up, and the judge couldn't summon the courage to either give him bail or commence his trial. After all, the president had said what Besigye should be asking for is a speedy trial. So, the irony of that was not lost, because the DPP is answerable to the state. So the DPP should be told to start the case immediately. But the issue for me there is I've read somewhere, one of the media houses here quoting that judge saying that he has been subjected, since then, he has been subjected to abuse. His family members have been intimidated and so on.
by the state.
No. This is now from public odium because of the ruling he gave to send Besigye back to jail. But the question,
Yeah, and rightly so. That's the point I'm making.
yeah,
The point I'm making is, you are a judge. Okay, you're talking about the temple of justice, right?
yes,
And somebody who shouldn't have been in a military, you should have been under military custody, right?
yes,
Is brought to you. Is no ordinary person,
yes,
and even if it was a peasant who was in that state, all
yes.
right. I mean, the law loses its claim to humanity when the judge has the options, to give bail, okay,
Yeah,
or even say this person has to be sent to a hospital,
yes.
make an order where the people can. I mean, the court can get a doctor's report on what uh,
The state of his
he's
health.
suffering from. Yeah, I mean that for me, no court should be talking about the rule of law and humanity, and the law is there. You have the discretion,
To actually
to
exercise the rule of law.
yeah, yeah. I mean that's what Benedicto Chiwanuka did, and I think judges have to do that. And I'm not surprised that the people reacted that way. You know, and the judges, if they don't make it clear where they stand on violation of rights and the inhumanity that is caused, then they will be running from the dictators to a populace that will hang them. You see?
As you were about to finish that statement, I was remembering what happened to a lot of the judges after Moi. I mean, it was humiliating to see
Yes.
what. Just talk to us about what happened
Well, after Moi, there was something which was called the radical judicial surgery, and so it wasn't about judicial integrity and independence. Really, it was the people who had come into power. The guy who was minister for
then.
justice saying we have to get rid of all Moi judges, all right, and we have to make sure that Kibaki
Mm.
has his own judges, all right.
Yes,
And that's what happened, and there was
yes,
some
yes.
judges who are totally innocent who challenged it, and they were found to be okay. Uh, but during the after we promulgated the constitution, there were provisions in the constitution that basically
Mm.
decreed that anybody who was in the judiciary before the promulgation of the constitution will have to be vetted. And
Mm.
there was a vetting board. It had great people like Abiy Sachs of South Africa, some judge
Mhm.
from Ghana and Zambia.
Mm.
And so
Mm.
they went through all those processes, and the processes were basically about integrity. Okay,
Yes,
they were
yes.
about also forensic audits of people's lifestyles and how they acquired, you know, properties and so forth, and all manner of things. And
Mm.
some judges were sent home, and then the constitution itself provided for the recruitment of judges. That was, pretty transparent, with very robust public participation. So the interviews will be televised, and the people who had misgivings about any candidate would come the Judicial Service Commission and say so, and a lot of people were basically, removed, or they were not appointed. And I think this is that happened because the Kenyans wanted this delinking of the judiciary from its colonial and new colonial past. Okay,
Right.
they wanted the judiciary to be independent, to be incorruptible, and to be brave. All right,
and deliver justice.
Yeah, deliver justice. Even in the same constitution where we got into what is called African justice systems, of promoting them, because in this country only 70% of the population goes to the formal courts. The other people go to the elders, to the pastors, to the bishops, to the witch doctors, and where they think they'll get justice anyway, and where justice is not as expensive as in formal courts.
So in this context, and I know when we were talking, as part of getting ready for this show, this is an issue I put to you, and I like you to help people who are listening to understand what is the purpose of courts like court martial. I mean, what role is and what purpose does it serve in the judicial system? Because people need to understand, why has it become such a big deal, making it a place where you take people? So
I think I think in the case of Kenya, there were all these, particularly in the 80s, when there was that coup d'etat, the attempted coup d'etat,
Ochuka.
Ochuka, all the soldiers who faced trials. It was a military tribunal, so they were tried, and I think I haven't studied the history of it, but it's basically must be very, very, very colonial. The whole system of saying military discipline is so important, right? If people do stuff, they have to be tried by colonels and whatnot. Okay, but transformative constitutions, and the Uganda is one of those, I'm sure. Not as transformative as ours, but still, it's a constitution that came out of all those struggles, in Uganda, and the military dictatorships and all that, and so it was also a constitution that wanted to make sure that the past was not repeated. So under those circumstances, even Besigye is a civilian. I mean, he used to be a colonel, but he's not a colonel anymore. He's not in the military. I mean, I found it very odd that somebody who was a colonel in the army would basically be taken to a kangaroo court. The military courts are known for that. They don't follow procedures. They don't comply with the constitution. So they can do
there's
anything.
There's also the competence of
they can,
those who sit in judgment.
And they are told, once they are told by their commanding officer, that Robert has to hang. That's it. They're going to.
Because they also can't disobey orders.
If you disobey orders, that's you can be disciplined. So
you are talking about.
So I don't know.
No, you were. I was going to.
They are unconstitutional, and I think the Supreme Court decided as much, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And I wanted to say to you that we actually do have that history in Uganda. Idi Amin in 1977
Mm-hmm.
arrested a number of political opponents
Mm-hmm.
and tried them before what he called a military tribunal.
Mm-hmm.
I guess he meant tribunal. And but one thing I remember, I was young then, but
Yeah.
it was such a chilling
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And at the country, at least maybe not the country, but those of us who were aware of were living in fear.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what was even more disturbing is that the judges, or rather the tribunal, the people who sat on that tribunal, were always hooded. So we will never know who these guys were who sat. Yeah, but what they did is they sentenced 15 of them
Mm-hmm.
to execution by firing squad. Then one was acquitted, and ironically, he is still alive today. He's probably close to 100. He's a father of one of my friends, and he's written a very, very good book called The Dungeons of Nakasero.
Mm.
But those people were then executed publicly.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that very well. And there was two hooded.
Yes, so they were hooded and executed. No, actually, yeah, but one of them managed to remove his hood. So I don't know how he did it.
Mm-hmm.
But what was even more chilling is that the people were ordered to come and watch. That so the message was very chilling and very clear that this is the kind of summary justice that will arise from. So with a history like that, why would anyone want to revive that approach to the delivery of justice, especially when your historical claim has been to fight against human rights abuses, against extrajudicial killings? That is the justification for your war. How do you square with that now, with this kind of behavior? And I'm saying this to you because our next conversation is going to be that, what Parliament is going to do. But I just wanted to raise that issue with you.
Yeah, I think what Idi Amin did was what any dictator would do in terms of what is called the reign of terror. All right, you basically want to create so much fear, in the citizenry, and it always doesn't work. It always doesn't. It doesn't work. I see a lot of the abductions, the violations of rights, and so forth. They are just about creating fear so that people don't demand their rights, and but it always backfires. It's always backfires in my view. But the 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 politics of the dictatorship in those cases is we've got to keep these people scared, okay? Very, 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 very scared. And but they get resisted. They get resisted. I see Stella is one of the of the listeners here. You get somebody who says, you can jail me or you can kill me, and I'm ready for either option.
Right. And actually, me, I think the more dangerous one is the ones you drive underground, the ones who may not stand up to you, but are very effectively undermining you, because now they understand your method of operation. You're not going to tolerate any dissent or anything that doesn't agree with you. So then they go subterranean.
Yeah. And I think in East Africa that is going to happen. It happened in Kenya in the 70s, and 80s, because there's something about human beings. Beings don't no human beings like to be humiliated, to be oppressed, to be tortured. All right. And this issue of underground,
and I just want to add to that, they also don't like to see someone else going through the same thing.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And
Mm.
what the dictators don't understand is that there comes a time when that reign of terror doesn't mean anything. Okay, it doesn't.
Yes.
There's an uprising, and you find these dictators, fleeing. You know,
I,
and
I think in the in
Mhm.
philosophical language it's called the death of fear.
Yeah, yeah, it should be. I mean, it's and in any case, in some of our countries, if you have, like in Kenya, university students, graduates who don't have a job, right?
Mm, mm,
They, a lot of people who are poor, they can't make ends meet. Uh,
mm.
eh, those, you can't threaten them with the death when they are,
They are very near death
yeah,
anyway, as things are.
they are experiencing it.
Yeah.
And what is also positive, I think, in East Africa is the fact that the so-called middle classes,
Mm, mm,
uh, with this taxation and everything else.
mm.
I noticed when there was an uprising in Kenya, there are a lot of people who joined. Uh, they kept their cars very far away, and they took off their ties and
Mm.
and joined. And I think that
I had stories of because I did interview
yeah,
two people who were involved in it,
yeah,
and they were coordinating with Uber drivers
yeah,
and
yeah,
and food delivery people who were making sure the kids were well fed, and they
yeah,
were being driven to the
yeah,
protests.
yeah, yeah.
So
And
so
the doctors, the young doctors who agencies were there to treat them, and the lawyers from the LSK, the young, also very courageous Gen Z fellows. They were
yeah,
there to go to the police station to make sure that these guys were uh, released, and he collected
in
bail and all that. And there was a lot of money contributed by the people. You know, uh,
in the case of Besigye,
yeah,
part of the pressure actually originated from the Uganda Medical Association,
yes,
who called a press conference and
mm,
said, look, his health condition
mm,
requires that
mm,
he receives. And so actually the hearing
mhm,
where he was actually brought forward
mhm.
to hear. So it was quite a pleasant surprise to see that a professional organization could take a stand in
Yeah,
where nobody was.
yeah, they must. They will have to stand to take those stands, because I think that in East Africa, I think no one is safe. So those people
Well,
who have this delusion that
mm,
they are safe and that they won't join the uprisings and so forth,
mm,
it's tough luck, because I don't think the kind of leaderships we have are going to change.
no.
No, they are not going to change. Yeah.
You see, the other pressure, and I have to acknowledge them, were the young activists in Uganda who were on social media who just made so much noise
Hmm.
that, yeah. So and there were very very many of them. There was the Agora people. There was all sorts of groups that pushed for this. So I just want to say, Doctor, to the guys online that I'll open up for people who may want to hear from you and may have their own questions to ask you about this. And so you guys know what to do. So while I wait for you to respond, let me just put another point to Willy. Willy,
Mm,
now the political response. This
mm,
is where it gets interesting. So the
mm,
political response first was to take Besigye to the High Court finally and
mm,
charge him with treason,
mm.
send him back. Now all the NRM MPs have been taken for a retreat to discuss how to amend
Mm,
the Army Law, the
mm,
UPDF Act,
mm,
to provide for trial for civilians in the in the military courts.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, from a purely jurisprudential point of view, how would that work? Because what was challenged was the constitutionality. Now you are amending an act which is subordinate to the constitution. What's your view of that?
Well, it's clearly unconstitutional. You know, the constitution is a supreme law. All right.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
common law doctrines or statutes, you know, have to be aligned to the constitution. And that's
Mm.
why, you know, in Kenya, there's so much of this public interest litigation where people just go to court because the legislation is unconstitutional. All right. They haven't
Mm.
done what they're supposed to do. So even that one, I'm quite certain that people will go to court and have it struck down. Uh, and I think you have also a history of pretty robust public interest litigation, right?
Yes, we do. In fact,
Yes.
it's been on.
Mm-hmm.
It is so robust that the bench is overwhelmed by the number of cases to handle. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
even me personally, in my private capacity,
Mm-hmm.
I have been sued and taken to the Constitutional Court to interpret. Can you imagine? The Constitutional Court is being asked to rule on whether I have abused my freedom of expression to the inconvenience of some people. So that's
yeah. It's public interest litigation is the expression of people's sovereign power, in my view, and
Mhm.
it's very, very, very useful site, you know, for
Yes,
resisting illegality.
overreach,
And
overreach and impunity.
yes, that's yeah.
One of the most persuasive arguments that I have had against that amendment,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was from a judicial officer or somebody who said, "Look, we've developed the judiciary
Mm-hmm.
so much,
Mm-hmm.
we now have the capacity in the formal court system
Mm-hmm.
to handle even the most violent of criminals.
Mm-hmm.
So, what would be the justification for taking people to a court that whose exercise of judiciousness is in question?"
Oh, just to instill fear and to have kangaroo courts all over the place. Because, you know, dictators find this rule of law, this constitutionalism, very inconvenient.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's
Mm.
why they keep on trying to come up with legislation, you know, to do this and the other. And, you know, and then they have the attorney general, other people who are not really ready to tell them that, you know, you can't do this. And I think that's a problem with our constitutions. As I've said, unless you have a political leadership that is really committed to the vision of
Mm.
a constitution, okay,
Mm.
which vision in a lot of constitution, it's great.
Mm.
um, when you look at chapter 6 of the constitution on leadership and integrity, you look at
Mm.
the chapter on political parties.
Mm.
In fact, all our political parties are unconstitutional because they don't comply, you know, with Article 91. They have militia, you know, they don't hold congresses, they uh,
Yeah, that's true.
organize politics on the basis of ethnicity, religion, race, whatever. Hmm?
Mm.
And and and
They, they,
uh,
they,
and
they go into handshakes without delegates conferences to approve.
yeah, the moment the checks change hands, that's 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 the end of it. But you see, it's the same class in
Right.
in the Kenya. What you see, it's we have had debates with a lot of my friends when I tell them,
Mm.
there's a class here, and
Mm.
they say, no, 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 this faction is the lesser evil, as if people choose evil.
Only evil.
Yeah. So you don't, and what happened? The Gen Z, our friend Baba,
Mm.
uh, was involved. Is I think his fifth handshake, because we have found out that the first handshake was actually in the 60s, late 60s and early 70s, when his father was in detention, and
He, he,
Jomo Kenyatta gave him some contracts to deliver gas cylinders. It's in his book Flames of Freedom.
oh, so
So,
his handshakes have been
oh yeah, 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 and his handshakes have a problem because they reinforce dictatorships.
yeah,
You are in the opposition, you have a handshake, and you completely uh, uh, strengthen, you know, the status
yeah.
quo. That is so brutal, you know.
Mm.
It's a problem, but at least it's very good for people to realize that
Mm.
there is uh, a class, and they have these common interests, you know. and
Mm.
and somebody, on X, said, when Baba did not support the Gen Zs,
Yes.
he said, that's great. This class should be, the faction uh, should be buried together. You know,
Yeah. The,
uh,
all of them.
yeah,
All of them should be swept.
yes, and
So
that particular class is not just political. In the case of Kenya, I've realized there is a corporate. There is also even the theological,
yeah,
uh, uh,
uh,
powerful.
ours
Yeah. So it's
ours is even worse. The church is completely gone.
mm,
There's they just can't say anything. They've been completely compromised. They're gone.
yeah.
So Willie, I have two people ready
Yes.
to speak. Let's be a bit more. Let's consult the students.
Okay. All right.
So I've got the Kenyan German lady. What do you want to say?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks very much for according me the
Yep.
opportunity to speak. I acknowledge and recognize the presence of Dr. Willy Mutunga, and I recognize your presence, dear host. Thank you very much. Now, I'm not quite a student because I actually studied law and African history.
No, no,
Hello?
no, 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 no. I need to explain. No,
Yeah.
I need to explain that this is a joke between me and Willie. That's why I used that phrase. It has nothing to do with you.
I,
Okay.
I
All
absolutely
right.
get it.
So
Thank you very much for a clearance. Now, what I want to ask is what is it going to take Ugandans to rise up against this dictatorship that has been ongoing for over 40 years? Once you let a system be ingrained to the extent that people are deprived of basic human needs like food, water, uh, then there is an eruption. What we can see or what we're observing in Uganda is there's a teen, as Dr. Willy Mutunga tried to explain, it's kind of a can that is being pressed. So it has to pop out from the sides at one point. And I'm sure that Besigye is wondering whether people are fighting and standing on his behalf. Why is it that Ugandans are relying so much on the voices of Kenyans? Why can't they fight back? Why can't you guys go to the streets? I mean, what is hindering you? Because the only medicine for any dictatorship is not prayer, but protest. They have to understand that people have to protest as much as the East African community is uniting. And I know that going up to the period of elections, there are going to be a lot of protests in Kenya, in fact, quite intense, as opposed to the past, because we saw that in 2023 when there were Maandamano, and Dr. Willy Mutunga once again talked about uh, Raila Odinga. So the greatest asset from my perspective that was bequeathed upon Raila Odinga was, of course, the handshake. That is the way he makes money. So he will call, he has the power to call from this protest, the Mandamano. And once people go to the protest, he goes and makes a deal with the government, and then he gets his money and then stops the protests. But my main concern is I have the feeling, and I might be mistaken, that Ugandans are relying so much on what is going to happen in Kenya in order to make a move.
No.
Okay.
They are demonstrating. They are demonstrating.
And you'll be
And
very surprised what the young Ugandans are doing.
they are demonstrating, and the joke actually used to be that the Tanzanians were the Tanzanians.
Sorry, let me sort out this.
Yeah.
Let me sort. Willie, let me sort this. Yeah. Okay. All right. Oh, sorry. Willie, I may have muted you accidentally, so please unmute your mic.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Okay.
So,
Good. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to tell her that, and have also I was going to tell this story about East Africa, that the Tanzanians were always thinking about revolution.
Yes.
And the Kenyans demonstrate and demonstrate and demonstrate.
Yes.
And the Ugandans just take guns and take over power. So you can't underestimate them. You can't underestimate them.
But
And
Willie,
I think that solidarity that is happening.
Yeah.
The Kenyans went to the embassy. Those of us who are Dar es Salaam alumni, in Nairobi, we've drafted a petition, which we hope the High Commissioner will actually hand it over to Museveni. We're talking about people who are in Dar with him, all right? And they were trying to shame him. Yeah, and there's no problem, because I'm not going to come to Uganda. I might be abducted, but from this safe distance, we are going to tell him. All right. This is very inhuman. Okay, very, 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 very inhuman. You cannot have people who are sick. We're talking about the military tribunals and everything else. All right. And so far we have, and I think also the guys in Tanzania will probably sign. So we need we'll be able to take that to the High Commission here. But the young people, and again the Gen Zs and millennials have been at it because of these abductions, and the East African youth have to have that solidarity. In my view,
I mean, you remember when they abducted Maria Sarungi, the outcry, the Tanzanian journalist, the editor.
Yes,
the outcry was so huge that they had to go and dump her someplace, so that otherwise, so that solidarity can actually deliver results.
Yeah, and she had been in Kenya for almost 2 years, so she worked with quite a number of civil society groups, and they were definitely going to take her across the border, and that dictator called Samia was obviously waiting there at the border. Who says that our mothers can't become dictators?
Well, we are seeing now. I was going to respond to the lady that.
Yes. Yeah.
You see, we must be cognizant of the different political cultures. I mean, one of the things about Ugandans is people say, oh, Ugandans are very polite. They are very they're very meek. They don't like to tell you the truth and so on. But in that state, they're actually probably more subversive than anyone I know, because yes, because I can tell you the most interesting thing during the struggle in the 80s. Obote's personal doctor, who was, or rather, maybe not his personal doctor, but the doctor who was in his medical team in Entebbe, or was responsible for, was also the same one treating the rebels, the NRA rebels. Yes, Dr. Makumbi. So everybody was shocked when he suddenly became a minister in Museveni's government. I mean, so there's and it's very interesting how many people are busy during the day they're busy shouting and abusing you, and then at night they're warning you and saying, by the way, please go into hiding. Because I've just been in a meeting where I am the one who advocated for you to be locked up. So they may not go on the streets, but they are likely to do things that actually could do more damage than going onto the streets. Because also, martyrdom is not a very normal thing here in Uganda. So I just thought people need to understand and respect that. The solidarity is good. But even those actions, Willie, that you're talking about, I mean, so this statement, let me just follow it up a little bit. This statement, what will you basically be saying in this statement?
Well, we touch on the his history in Dar es Salaam. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And we praise him for being progressive, and we tell him, so what you have become is really not acceptable, and this is what you have to do. We telling him to release the Kano.
Why don't you address it to him on X? He's quite active there. It's very unlikely that his high commissioner will see him in the next 2 years.
Yeah, we'll put it. We would definitely. I would definitely put it on my, X, X handle, and
you just address him directly.
Yeah. We've heard. I've always addressed him directly when he starts talking about his past revolutionary credentials.
Yeah.
So I always remind him that he's betrayed them. So he cannot now, he's betrayed those revolutionary credentials, in my view.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he shouldn't be talking about imperialism. He shouldn't be talking about this. He's in bed with those forces. So fine. So we will do that, and we will share it so that our friends in Uganda can also look at the petition.
I've got a few more, or two more people who want to say something. Redemptor Mutali.
Who?
There's somebody called Redemptor. Can you speak? She's. She asked. Go ahead.
Thank you for an opportunity. I wish to appreciate the host and the speaker, Dr. Mutunga. He has given us a new term, revolutionary credentials, and I think he has earned his. Mine is a comment. Mine is more of a comment. And before I speak, the woman I'm named after is buried in Uganda, so my people are there. And the first question I usually ask Ugandans is, what happened to you? Because there's a preacher who came to a meeting and started boasting how you've had 8 presidents while you only had 3. And then Kafika Mali and you pressed a full stop and nothing seems to be moving anyway. Yeah,
Willy, let me go and sleep.
Yeah, I mean, when we grow up, we wanted to be like Uganda, but now it's shocking. I think one, I call Uganda the land of milk and honey in terms of just how fertile the land is, that it's possible for people to live in the village. I mean, Ugandans grow matoke as part of landscaping. And I think that's one of the problems because Wameshiba, I think that's one of the problems because I think it is because when it comes to being educated, in fact, if you Google, you'll find Ugandans speak better English than Kenyans. I mean, small things like those that always surprise a lot of people about who the Ugandan people are. But then this happened, and it's like we are watching, and we are like, okay. And so my question and comment, my observation, and I would want Dr. Mutunga to comment on this because he understands the East African terrain very well. He studied in Tanzania. Is in the region, we seem to have a phenomenon that I will call pseudo opposition, or is it? And then they give us a placebo of hope, a pill of hope that we will liberate you. And then when you're a very keen observer, you just realize these people are buddies. And they're buddies in the sense that they even get funding. Oppositions get funding. I think in Kenya, it's 6% of the national budget goes to opposition. So it's a very lucrative thing to be the opposition. So how do you highlight to the citizenry that not to peg too much hope in this placebo pill of hope, that the opposition is what will liberate people? That's my first question. The other one is there's something I call unshackle me from gratitude. That the people who have fought for liberation get so entitled that you can never talk about them. In our case, the great Baba, who again his credentials for liberation are now under the microscope. What do you do so that the lessons from Kenya, you don't now replicate them in Uganda, where you hero worship the opposition as your savior? How do the younger generation is teaching us something? Those are my observations and comments, and thank you for the opportunity.
Redemptor, let me answer the Uganda question. Tumegeuza leadership too many times, we got tired. That's what happened. We didn't put a full stop, we just got tired and fell on the side. so there's your answer. But I'll let Willy respond immediately to your questions.
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier that in the case of Kenya now, we're talking about alternative political leadership because we know the opposition has never been, an opposition, and there's no doubt about that. But I think in East Africa, we've got also to track, the links and the continuities of resistance, because I don't think there is any time where the East African people are not resisting. Okay, there isn't. Even when there is a dictatorship, military dictatorship, wherever, there is a continuing link and the continuities of resistance, and that is something we have to to glorify. We've got to glorify that, because you can imagine if the people don't take to the streets, they don't laugh at our dictators on TikTok. We just dictatorships will be what they are, dictatorships, and we will have fascism, and but that resistance that I've seen in Kenya, seen it in Tanzania and Uganda, our historians have to glorify it, because it's you read some stuff and it's like these dictators are not challenged. They are challenged in different forms of resistance. That's why in this country, in Kenya, there was a time when the Attorney General told us that it was treasonable to imagine the death of the president. And we said, but we always praying for his death. You
How,
know.
how would you get the evidence of that imagination? You see, so
No,
that's
it's just again creating fear,
fear mongering.
yeah. So that's in Jonjo when he said it, it's like he was telling guys, we know those of you who are wishing that the president dies and it's treason, and we'll get you, and then you should. The other thing I wanted to say, Rob, is
Yeah.
uh, we should not underestimate the people who rule us. All right.
And I think that's a very common mistake.
Yes, it's very, very common mistake. They know, like the Kenyans, they know how to mobilize on the basis of ethnicity, particularly.
Yes.
You find they have this following that is fanatical, and it's just ethnic, and we've got to know what makes, agency said that they are tribalist, which is a good beginning, I think, because the way they mobilize, and they are also very good at creating myths. Baba is called Agwambo, and Agwambo is a spirit. Okay. The baron from my own community,
Yes.
Kalonzo Musyoka,
Yes.
he has his own myth. His home is near Tana River,
Yes.
a place called Sekuru, right?
Yes.
And I've had people tell me, some people who are very educated, they
Yeah.
they tell me, do you know that when Kalonzo swims in Tana River, the crocodiles make way?
Well,
It's just,
well,
you
our
know.
our man had his own myths when he was in the bush. They used to say he'd turn into a
Oh,
cat.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that is actually borrowed from Kimathi, because I remember hearing those myths about Dedan Kimathi in the 50s.
yes.
So but it's one way of there's a guy in Kenya, you might have heard of him, called the Prophet Owo, David Owo.
Yes, I think I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people that you cannot underestimate somebody who, whenever he goes to Nakuru, people, shampoo the
Yes.
streets. Okay. Yeah, for heaven's sake, Jesus never got that treatment,
Oh.
in the 3 years of his mission. There's only one woman who washes feet, with some perfume. Okay. But this is a guy who has a following. And so we have to, in the people's opposition, we have to find out how to destroy that strength.
And so one of the lessons you're saying is to not underestimate the forces of oppression. Not only are they well organized, they actually do have some of the most brilliant minds working for them. And
yes, and they have foreign interests that prop them,
that are vested in their success here.
Yes.
So I have two more people. Let me just hear from them. Joe, developer.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity. Yes, I would like to propose we discuss potential actions we can take as a group to support Besigye Kisa, whether that's contacting international human rights organizations or raising awareness in our community. It is also crucial that we stand in solidarity with the people of Uganda who are fighting for democratic rights and freedom of speech in the face of a repressive regime. Yes, as we understand that Besigye Kisa is a prominent opposition figure in Uganda, known for his efforts to challenge the government policies and push for I would like to propose we discuss potential actions we can take as a group to support Besigye.
Okay, I'll come back to that with Willy later. Let me Alex Muhire, Senior.
Good evening, people.
How are you?
Sorry. Yeah, good. I came in late, but I was interested where I found you. The gentleman just spoke, diverted me a bit, but let me touch on his thing. I think in East Africa, or in Africa, we've had a problem. I don't know if it's a trend or if it's a direct attack on democracies on African continent. That even if you had a leader voted in with any good percentage today, the next day or the next within the segment, the biggest fierce opposition will be created, and in so doing, because Africa or East Africa, we are meant and loved of creating opposition leading. Sometimes I think it's sabotaging our development. So and diverted or the opposition that is created. It's not about policies, good policies that would disturb the so-called dictators, because on African continent, every leading or every sitting government must have a dictator. I don't see where we have a leader that has not been called a dictator unless he's a real dictator. And what I'm saying, the real dictators are now not called dictators, because if you say it, then you will never say it the next day. So I think I'm not going to be speaking towards the Besigye detention, but let me also look at the rule of law. I think we have had oppositions that have become oppressive with their followings abusing the rights that we have, not creating policies that would stop the so-called, they would be called dictators from advancing their policies. They are rather in their parliaments bagging big bags of money, only going on the streets, not indulging their following into development or creating policies that would deter the would-be bad leaders from advancing. Instead, the same opposition leaders have been opposition leaders for forever without any results, and we all have to keep saying dictators and opposition. It's either dictator and opposition leaders. We have not had any go from that.
Arafat Beidechi. Arafat, are you there? Okay, Willy, let's get back to the conversation. I mean, so back to and the interesting thing you talked about is one of the continuum of resistance in the region. So what would be the immediate things that can be done for Besigye, who is now languishing between jail and mentions in court for a case that's not going to go anywhere, and the guy in Tanzania, I'm forgetting, I think it's called Satya. So what can be done? What are the specific actions the lawyers, the people who because the way, like in the case of Besigye, the person who is holding that fire is Winnie as the wife, but you sort of see there's no clear leadership on how this should be handled.
Yeah, it seems to be there's definitely a legal strategy, right? He has lawyers, right?
Yes.
So that's it's important. This also movement for his release, that is, it's East African.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I think it's very, very, very important. I think also, the international solidarity, by Ugandans, Kenyans, Africans, coming into this campaign is will also be, will be very, 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 very important. But I think the legal strategy for me has to take into account the issues of his health, so that there are applications that are raised about that, and I think that will expose the dictatorship to, the dictatorships in humanity. Okay, that's what people are seeing. You see, it's like what is happening in Palestine. Okay,
Yes.
when regimes start killing children and bomb hospitals, they do this kind of thing. Okay, it's something that brings global solidarities. We saw it with the Black Lives Matter. Remember
And
that one?
actually, I
Uh,
will tell you that in this particular arrest of Besigye,
yeah,
in the beginning there was a bit of ambivalence, and in
yeah,
fact, when the recordings were released of his
mhm,
conversations with these people, the
mhm,
the reaction, there was a divided reaction. They were saying, some of them were saying, but Besigye also, why is he? And then the photos of his physical deterioration were posted, and things changed. The whole argument was shifted from whether or not he had done these things to how the issue now became his treatment. Why is he being treated like that?
that's right, and I think you are right. What I see is something that Samir Amin has discussed, right? Where there is a growing consciousness, in the global south and the global north, among citizens, where people are basically saying you cannot keep on bombing people. You can't you can't have a police force that keeps on killing people. All right.
Yeah.
And you get that from citizens of the world.
Yes.
Not just, yeah, and within East Africa that is happening, and is very, very important to see, that process continues, where, as one of the activists was saying, he was in his ex, a guy called Halid, who led the march to the Ugandan High Commission.
Yes.
Is saying abducting people, whether it's in Uganda or Tanzania or anywhere in the world, it's inhuman.
So
So
Willie,
I
I
think
guess
we should.
now I was going to say, I guess we now go beyond the technical arguments as to whether things are legal or not. We're now gone to the basic question of humanity.
Yeah, and that's where the politics is.
Yes.
That's where the politics is, and I think one of the weaknesses of our dictatorships in East Africa is that they don't care about that. Right? They don't seem to have any humanity themselves. So and they don't realize a lot of these things are being watched by people all over the place, even young kids. I was seeing in Nairobi when there were these disappearances parents coming, crying in court.
By the way,
because they thought.
Talking about that, one of the most interesting things was the story of the cabinet secretary whose own child was kidnapped.
Yes.
And he
Right.
recounts the story. It had to take him to. So he calls the head of security, and the head of security denies having his son. And he then calls the president, who orders the head of security to release the boy. And then, how does that happen? What is going on?
Yeah. And he was cabinet secretary, and he's very lucky the president picked, answered his
because
call.
he could have ignored him.
He could have ignored him. So, but that shows you, that basically shows you that the state is implicated, is involved in these abductions and extrajudicial killings and so forth. And that's why I think the lawyers here have started saying they have to go back to the ICC, because these leaders are leaders who kill citizens, and they violate the rights of citizens. That's not my area, but I guess if we can frame them as crimes against humanity, all right, let's people try that international law and see where it takes us.
I'm going back to your Moi past, because I'm going back to your Moi past. The cumulative effect of this inhuman treatment of people, of a disregard of what people think. What does it lead to in the end, and how do those who used to carry out these kinds of action cope after all of this power is gone? I mean, I remember there was somebody in Kenya was called a total man during Moi's time, which meant he had absolute power. So, but these killings eventually had their toll. I mean, assassination of Ouko, Bishop Muge, there were the detentions of the George Anyonas and all those people. What is the cumulative effect of that on the establishment that has that kind of behavior?
Well, it's very, very difficult to rationalize dictators. I don't even know how they think.
No, I'm just asking you to relate to us. I'm not asking you to rationalize or explain it. I'm just saying, what happens in the end to this behavior? Does it lead to anywhere progressive?
No, it doesn't, because if anything, it's a root of serious resistance. That can be stopped, and a lot of people who go through detentions and so forth. I'm yet to see somebody who was in detention and basically decided that he wasn't going to fight on. Okay. Invariably, you come out saying this should not happen to anybody.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, and there are people like that, and we see them all the time. When you might think they are fighting, might think Stella Nyanzi is just fighting her own battles, right? But it's not. It's not. It's these are warriors, okay, who are saying you can't do this to me, all right? And you can't do it to anybody else, So for me, this route of dictatorship, it's not a route that is sustainable. Okay, it's not sustainable, because people will resist. Okay, and they won't stop. The resistance. And it's as they continue abducting people, the anger grows, and before you know it, you have uprisings, and That's a trajectory of it in my, in my opinion, because I've tracked it, in Kenya, and when it goes underground, you don't know what might happen.
Exactly.
Because there you are in the area of self-defense. Okay, people get armed, and they also know how to shoot.
So one of the things, I mean, you've talked about Stella Nyanzi, and you've talked about the people who become images of either the things that should be done to other people or how to stand up. I mean, I've remembered in 1976 the famous photograph of Hector Peterson in South Africa, who was shot during the student riots, and then I think it was either his brother or somebody was carrying him. Now that became a symbolism.
Yeah.
Now you can. My own thinking is you can actually diffuse this thing by letting Besigye go home, or you hang on to him, and he suddenly becomes a symbol of all the things that people have a grievance against you.
Yeah, you are right. I mean, dictatorships don't want to admit that they are inhuman. They always think that there's something useful that they are doing to the people. But when it comes to a situation like Besigye, how within, as you said, those photographs, all right, said it all.
Yeah.
When you look at those photographs, it's, you stare at inhumanity, in the face, and they are everywhere. Okay, so any thinking dictator, would consider that, but I guess, again, I'm just rationalizing. I don't know, and I don't understand how people can be that cruel. Okay, particularly to people they have known, people who saved their lives in the bush, for example, a doctor who did all this stuff. All right. I can't understand that kind of inhumanity, except to basically say it's not sustainable. Okay. And it's not acceptable. It has to be resisted, and it has to be resisted by this support that is getting across the border. It's important, because Kenyans are saying, Besigye's violation of rights is our problem.
Yeah, and it started there. That's that.
Yes, and it started there. We basically saying this abduction wasn't done in our name because it was unconstitutional. They even abducted some tax.
By the way,
I guess you heard
strangely,
that.
the Kenyan government has been completely silent about this issue.
Yeah, and these guys, Mustafa and another one, they had been here for 21 years. They were refugees. Therefore, it was totally illegal and unconstitutional to hand them over, to the Turkish dictatorship.
So my question then is, has anyone asked the Kenyan government what they have to say about the actions and activities that led to the abduction of Besigye? Have they said anything, explained anything?
Yeah, the questions they're being asked, but they haven't said anything. But I know that these questions are have been asked. People have been talking about the Kenyan foreign policy, whether it's Haiti, whether it's Palestine,
even
because
and
our
now
constitution says,
and now Sudan. You have formed a government in exile.
yes.
So, but the
Yes,
question,
we are going to have our golden bag again here. Yes.
so I then ask the question. So, where does that leave the East African Federation? I mean, President Museveni has been pushing for East African Federation, and he talks about Pan-Africanism, East African. But with this regional thing, the population seems to be in disagreement with the direction of the political leadership. So how can this even work?
So what we are going to have is what we had in 1958, before the states came in. What we see is people to people solidarities, and that's what we should build. Yeah, because before OU came in and before the states, came in, the 1958 All Africa Conference in Accra was people-based unions, and it wasn't states.
True.
Because once we gave it to the states, all right. What did we get? We get a leadership in Africa that this is you have dictators in AU. I guess the young people in the West are doing things that are interesting. Botswana has told the Americans to remove their bases. So there are things that are happening, but we have to talk about Pan-Africanism. Talk about the vision of Nkrumah, Nyerere, even the Gaddafi. I've heard a lot of Kenyans who say Gaddafi was this or the other. He called for African unity, he called for African currency, and he had an idea of how the African unit was going to work. So did Nkrumah, so did Anta Diop, the professor, and obviously Amika Cabral, and even Thomas Sankara. So it's and this is also the Pan-Africanism is also extends beyond the continent, because we have Africans in the Caribbean, we have them in other in other countries. Yes, so it has to be, and this is what the young people are teaching us. When they demonstrate in Kenya for Besigye, all right. There is a link between them and the Ugandan people, the Ugandan youth, because the governments don't care. They are abducting people and taking them to across the border. So I think that we've got to look at the also the positive aspects of these violations of human rights, because they are speeding up
the mobilization,
solidarities. Yes, mobilization, solidarities. We didn't expect to happen that quickly, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing, and it's good that East Africans are talking about Besigye and the Africans and people all over the world. So that's for me is good.
So as a way of winding up, one of the big issues that you raised, but which is now current, is as you said, there's a lot of foreign interests that are vested in these political establishments that are behaving like this. But things are changing in the international order. Do you really think that although the so-called international community has been quiet about this type of behavior, Besigye, Satya in Tanzania, the abductions in Kenya, that actually the local agents of these foreign interests may find that they no longer have clients.
Yeah, yeah. I think I was going to say I was going to say that in Kenya we talk a lot about what we call the state of the nation. All right. We should now start talking about the state of the planet, because the nation belongs. It's and things like BRICS, things like the role China is playing now. Because I think there are debates that are happening all over the place that are very important. Even the discussions about the possibility of World War III.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then the ecological damage that is happening, the little wars, not serious wars that are taking place, and so forth. And I think we are at a stage in a planet where these issues become very, very, very important, because I've heard fellows say the Chinese will liberate Africa. Right? Okay. I've heard people do that. We have got to discuss whether that's yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So and the Chinese government that was helping Tanzania and Zambia and helping the liberation of Southern Africa. It's not
the current government.
It's not the current government, and
in fact, it has its own hegemonic interests.
Yes, and that solidarity that Mao Zedong used to talk about. Okay.
Yeah.
In our case, when we had this the SGR, for example, all right?
Yeah.
It's a scam.
Wow.
The SGR ended in somebody's farm in Naivasha. So we need to start talking about the state of the planet. You remember Nambudere?
Yes.
Was one of the East Africans who in the 80s, I think there was a Dar debate.
Yes.
In 82.
Yes.
But he went to Denmark and he wrote something on the political economy of social imperialism.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
Where he was interrogating the kind of socialism that was happening in Russia.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
In the Soviet Union, before the Soviet Union collapsed.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that term, social imperialism, was actually coined by the Chinese communists in 1963, when they were basically saying what is happening in Russia is not socialism. And of course, we now know there were oligarchs and whatever. So there is a lot that is happening that we as people, we have to basically discuss. The BRICS, it has all kind of characters in it. I can't call it Bantu at all.
No, it's not.
It's a different outfit, but we need to start discussing the status of the planet itself.
Right.
Okay. And not to ignore our national problems, because they are also interconnected. Okay.
Yeah. So
they are. When Gates comes to Kenya and as with his vaccines and whatnot, and it's a breach of the constitution, and we've just found out that he stays in a place called Tigoni. Maybe we'll tell the Gen Z's where that criminal is staying, so that
they can go and collect him.
They can abduct him.
So finally, the final.
Finally, yes.
You've said you're preparing a statement that's going to go to Museveni, so that's catered for. But I know that there are people who are on this call who would probably, who not probably, I know they'll be able to reach Besigye. What would you say to him? What if you were able to get a word to him? What would you say to him?
I guess yeah, I as a former detainee myself, right?
Yes.
You know, whenever somebody, you know, was detained and I defended them, and I went to prison to see them. All right.
Yes.
It's basically to glorify, okay, the position they have taken. When I see that guy, I don't see just the inhumanity, its sickness. I also see a lot of courage. Okay, I also see a lot of that. You know, and and so I know it's probably not the right thing to tell him to hang in there. We are coming.
Yeah.
But at least glorifying his courage, all right, and urging him to, you know, to keep on struggling, and that we are doing all we can, you know, in solidarity with his struggles. All right, that will, you know, be precisely my, you know, my position.
Dr. Willy Mutunga, thank you very much as always for your wise perspective.
Thank you for inviting me, and let's talk soon. Let's talk soon.
No. I will be with you sooner than you think. We have an obligation and a responsibility for enlightenment, conscientization, and helping those who come after us to avoid landmines and potholes and be able to do a better job than we did.
Yeah, and tell my sister Stella not to come to Kenya, you know, until it's safe. we don't want her abducted from here.
Well, Stella is listening, she knows. So, Willy, you have a good night. I plan to have one.
Yeah. So, and I thank everybody who, you know, has been on, you know, on the discussion. Yeah.
All right then. Kwaheri.
All right.
All right.
Okay, comrade. Thanks.